I want to start with a little thought experiment. Just for a second, I want you to picture a missionary, the very first image that comes into your head.
Okay.
I'm willing to bet you're seeing a Westerner,
Right.
maybe with like a big hiking backpack, heading off to a village somewhere in the global south.
That's the standard narrative for sure. For a long time, it was also the statistical reality.
Right, the West sends to the rest, but that whole narrative, it's getting really outdated.
The map is absolutely changing.
And that shift is exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We're looking at a book called Beyond Borders, a strategic roadmap to raise missionaries for the unreached by Chris R. Velazquez. And the premise here is, it's pretty radical. It flips that whole mental map you have upside down. Velazquez is arguing that the next great wave of global missions, it's not coming from the West, it's rising from the Philippines.
And he really takes it a step further. He calls the Filipino church a sleeping giant. The idea isn't just that they can go, it's that they are historically, culturally, and even geographically better positioned to reach the closed parts of the world than any Western nation is.
That is a massive claim. You're basically taking an entire nation from the recipient column.
The ones who get the aid.
Yeah, and moving them straight into the sender column, the people driving the force.
It's an underdog story.
Yeah.
But what makes his book so compelling is that it's not just, sentiment. It's backed by what Velazquez calls providential geography.
Okay, let's start right there. Providential geography. We all know where the Philippines is, but why does he look at that spot on the map and see a superpower?
Well, it really comes down to the neighbors. If you look at a map, really look at who surrounds the Philippines. You see the strongholds of the major non-Christian religions.
Okay.
To the north and west, you've got heavy Buddhist influence. To the south, Indonesia, Malaysia, some of the largest Muslim nations in the world.
Right, and these aren't just neighbors like Canada and the U.S. These are places that are often really closed politically and socially to Westerners.
Exactly. That's the crux of it. If you're a white American, you can't just walk into some of these countries with a Bible and a missionary visa. You're flagged immediately.
An outsider, a potential threat.
But the Philippines, it's a neighbor. They share trade routes. They share cultural DNA. The barrier to entry is it's so much lower.
So he compares it to Antioch in the Bible.
He does. Jerusalem was the center, right? But Antioch, this diverse, messy trade hub, that's what became the launch pad to the rest of the world. He's saying the Philippines is the modern Antioch for Asia.
So the location is strategic. That makes a ton of sense. But geography is only half of it. The book talks a lot about the Filipino character, and this one phrase stuck with me: unpolished but sincere.
That is such a vital distinction. If you walk into a typical Filipino church, you're not getting a dry academic lecture. You're getting tears. You're getting lifted hands. You're getting these raw, honest stories of survival. And that emotional accessibility, that unpolished nature, that's a huge asset.
Because a Western academic might see that and call it, too emotional. We really value the logic, the arguments.
We do. But if you're trying to reach a culture that operates on shame and honor or on deep emotional connection, a three-point intellectual argument feels cold.
Like a sales pitch.
Exactly. But a faith that knows how to weep, a faith that has suffered, that just bridges the gap. It's what the book calls embodied faith. It connects heart to heart before it ever tries to connect head to head.
There's also the generosity factor. The book uses the widow's mite story, which seems counterintuitive. Missions need funding, right? You look to the wealthy nations for that.
It seems like a disadvantage, but Velazquez argues it's a relational superpower. When a believer gives from poverty, like that widow, it completely changes the nature of their witness.
How so?
Well, think about it. A big Western organization builds a hospital. That's great. But the locals might just see, well, of course they did. They have unlimited money.
Right.
But when a Filipino missionary, who clearly has very little, shares their last meal, that's shocking. It says, my God is more real to me than my own comfort. You can't buy that kind of trust.
Okay, so we've got the right place, the right temperament, but the title calls them a sleeping giant. And sleeping means inactive. The book talks about this map of silence. And to get that, we need to break down the difference between unreached and unsent.
Yes, this is where we have to get a little technical, because for most people, unreached just means not a Christian yet.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
But in mission strategy, it means lacking access. It's a place where there is no viable reproducing church.
Reproducing feels like the key word there.
It is. The author uses a farming analogy, the difference between a seed and a harvest. One convert is a seed. It's a miracle, but it can't feed the community. A viable church is a harvest. It can feed people, it can teach, and it can send out its own workers.
And most of these unreached places are in what's called the 1040 window.
Right, that belt across North Africa, the Middle East, and Asia is where the population is exploding. But access to the gospel is the absolute lowest.
So that's the unreached. That's the problem to be solved. But the book says the Filipino church is unsent.
And that's the tragedy. The church there is thriving. It's huge. It's passionate. But the author warns that if it stays comfortable, it risks, and I'm quoting here, calcifying into complacency.
Wow. Calcifying into complacency. That's a haunting phrase.
It's like hardening the arteries.
Yeah.
He brings up the story of Esther. She was safe in the palace, but she's warned, who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this.
The idea being that their freedom, their thriving church, it's not just for them. It was given to them for these blank spaces on the map. Exactly.
So here's the tension. They're perfectly positioned. They're emotionally wired for it. The need is obvious. Why aren't they all going? What's keeping the giant asleep?
Well, culture is a double-edged sword. And the very things that make the culture so beautiful can also become what the book calls the safety trap.
Let's talk about Pokikisama. This is the idea of harmony, of getting along.
That's a good way to put it. It's a core value. You prioritize the group. You keep the peace.
Which sounds great for a church community.
It is. For community building, it's fantastic. But it can restrain obedience. Think about the biblical prophets. Were they harmonious?
No, not at all. They were disruptors. They rocked the boat constantly.
If your highest value is not making waves, how do you follow a radical calling that's going to upset your family? The pressure to conform just keeps you in your seat.
And then there's the other one, utang na loob.
The debt of gratitude. This is a deep, almost sacred loyalty to your family for raising you.
Which again, sounds like a virtue. Honor your parents. It is. But the weakness is that it can anchor believers economically. The good child is the one who works to support their aging parents. Leaving for a low-paying mission field can feel like a betrayal of that duty.
So the culture is pulling you inward toward safety and obligation, while the mission is calling you outward into risk.
Precisely. And that leads to the comfort trap. The book basically says too many believers are waiting for a guarantee before they take a step.
It quotes Jesus here, right? Foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head.
It's a stark reminder. The kingdom doesn't grow in permanent security. The author says we need to see comfort as a launching pad, not a limitation.
I want to pivot now to resilience, because this is where the book flips the script in a really cool way. It takes the poverty, the natural disasters, and frames them as training.
Yes, this is the theology of inversion.
Meaning?
The biblical idea of God choosing the weak to shame the strong. The Philippines has this hard history of struggle.
The book talks about Typhoon Haiyan in 2013.
Right, a huge crisis.
Yeah.
And when it hit, the big international aid groups were overwhelmed. They couldn't get in fast enough. Who were the first responders?
The local churches, the youth groups.
The local youth groups. And they didn't separate the spiritual from the practical. They were clearing debris and praying with people, handing out food and offering hope. That holistic approach is exactly what's needed in a closed country.
Because you can't just preach on a street corner there. You have to be useful.
You have to be useful.
Yeah.
And if you're from a context where resources are scarce, your default is prayer and community and just sweat. You know how to suffer with people. That makes you so much more durable than someone who's used to everything working perfectly.
And speaking of being useful, we have to talk about the diaspora, the hidden army.
This is probably the most strategic point in the whole book. The millions of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs.
And nurses, the engineers, they're everywhere. All over the Middle East, Europe.
And here's the key. They are already there. They are inside the closed countries.
The book tells the story of Liza, the nurse.
Think about it. A Filipino nurse in a Saudi Arabian hospital. She's at the bedside during births, deaths, the most vulnerable moments. A Western pastor could never get a visa to do that. But she's there. She's trusted.
So she doesn't need to go. She's already gone.
The shift is identity, not geography. She just needs to see herself not just as a worker sending money home, but as a witness placed there by God. If even a fraction of OFWs made that mental shift, it would be the largest missionary movement in history.
Wow.
And this isn't new. The book mentions an early missionary to China, Vicente Hilario. He had almost no resources, but he could go where others couldn't because he wasn't seen as a threat. It's a heritage that just needs to be reclaimed.
So we have the giant, we have the army in place. Now, the future, the youth. The book talks about a youth crisis, which I found interesting.
The source says young people today care so deeply about causes, justice, climate, poverty. They'll march for it.
But they struggle with commitment.
They struggle with commitment. And the book argues it's because of this performance culture. Everything is measured in grades, likes, visible success. They're terrified of obscurity.
The Babel mindset. Let us make a name for ourselves.
Exactly. It's influencer culture. But Abraham was called to be blessed to bless the nations. It's a shift from building your platform to building a legacy for others.
So how do you get them to do that? I mean, be like Abraham is pretty abstract for a Gen Z kid.
Well, the book gets surprisingly practical. It actually suggests using virtual reality.
VR.
For mission, not for gaming, for embodied empathy. Imagine putting on a headset and walking through a refugee camp.
Oh, wow.
It disrupts your assumptions. It makes a statistic feel real. It closes that emotional gap.
And what about prayer? It says not just God bless the world.
Right. It calls for using ethno-linguistic maps, praying for specific people groups by name. When you know the name of a tribe, their struggle, your prayer becomes advocacy. You start to carry that burden.
I loved the next actions idea. It's like a productivity hack for your calling.
It's basically the getting things done method for missions.
Yeah.
Because go to the nations is just too big. It's paralyzing. What do you do on a Tuesday morning?
Right.
So the next action isn't save the world. It's apply for a passport or schedule a meeting with a mentor. It makes obedience something you can actually, do.
Which brings up the story of Raphael.
Yeah, he had all this curiosity about justice, but curiosity burns out. He needed a mentor to turn that spark into disciplined action. That's the missing link. They have the passion. They need the formation.
So let's pull this all together. The Philippines is geographically and spiritually primed. It's the Antioch of Asia.
And the barriers, like the cultural comfort trap, they're real, but the history of resilience is the very thing that can overcome them.
It really does feel like all the pieces are on the board. The giant is just starting to wake up.
It does. And the book leaves us with this really haunting question. It asks, was the gospel given to us only to be kept or to be carried forward?
That hits hard. It challenges this whole idea that faith is just about my personal security.
And I think the final thought to leave you with is about information. We are the most informed generation ever. You can pull up a map of the Unreached on your phone right now. We have the data.
We know exactly where the blank spaces are.
But the book reminds us that knowledge is not the same as love. Knowing where the blank spaces are doesn't mean you care about the people in them. And those people aren't waiting for more data. They're not waiting for a PDF.
They're waiting for presence.
They're waiting for a person.
That is a powerful place to leave it. Information does not equal transformation.
It requires movement.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating look at how that global map is shifting.
It's a roadmap that's definitely worth exploring.
And to you listening, thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.